We are going to start in 1 minute. 1 minute.
You hold me accountable to that? So my one and only debate last year. You did one and only debate. Yeah, I saw that. So.
This is a little.
Make sure you get your little sliver in. How are you? I couldn't. See you. Hi, Senator. Good to see you. You guys will walk around.
He understands that.
She walks in too. Good morning. How are you? Oh, yeah. Oh, hug anytime. No worries. Behave yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Tim Hansen, Superintendent at MSD Warren Township. I would like to welcome you to our 2025 Legislative Forum. We are going to get started right on time, but I do know a couple of folks are coming in a few minutes late, and that we'll get them caught up. Legislators, we can't have this day without you, so I want to extend our appreciation for your engagement, not only today, but throughout the year and throughout the session. I know I personally have lots of conversations with you around issues that impact our community and our school district. So again, thank you for that. I want to thank our MSD Warren Township exemplary school board members, which you'll get a chance to meet here in a minute. I want to thank our amazing Warren staff and our incredible, most importantly, our amazing Warren community. Thank you for being here today. We have one change from previous legislative forums. You see that green light there on the ceiling? We are live streaming this morning. We don't have interaction with our live stream, but folks can view this morning live, and it will be posted to our website with that. Legislators, I do want you to know that that is a mic light, so when the green light is on, it can hear conversation. As you talk, if you could still use the mic that's in front of you, just so that we can capture that, that would be helpful as well. As most of our legislative forums are, today you're going to hear a list of items and topics that are priorities for us that have been impacted by past or could be impacted by proposed legislation. As you listen today and throughout the session and in your day-to-day interactions, I continually encourage you to do what's best in the best interest of our Indiana Hoosier students, all of them. We're in a politically charged climate, as that typically happens around election time. And, you know, when we think about bills that impact Hoosier students, I know it's not easy, but you know, we ask, not only from Warren Township Public Schools, but all public schools, that whenever possible, we do not put kids in the middle of political or adult issues. And right now, there is a sensitivity around immigration. I'm so proud to be a public education superintendent because we accept every kid that comes through our door, no matter what their background is, no matter what their needs are, and we serve them to the best of our ability. And the number one thing that we promise them every day is their safety. And the trauma that would be possible with some sort of immigration that happens on a school campus is devastating for everybody involved. And I know that that's not necessarily in your hands, but if you have a position to impact that, we ask you to impact that in the best interest of our kids. Representative Gore cannot be here, and I want to end my little comments on a positive note. He has a House Bill 1517, and I would ask for your support. It is the American Professional Football Day. He wants to make the Monday after the Super Bowl a state holiday. So if we could all support that bill, I would appreciate that. As the second largest employer on the east side, that would help us great. That would help us greatly. With that, I would like to introduce our board vice president. Our president was not able to make it today. She is actually in Antarctica, where it was warmer this week than it was here. So with that, I'd like to introduce our vice president, Terry Amos, to open us up.
Good morning, everyone. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this moment, I'd like to take a second and introduce our board. I'll just start with Miss Julie French, Mr. Howard Dorsey, Kevin Humphrey, who serves as our secretary, and Gloria Williams, and not here yet, Miss LaShawna Triplett. Esteemed legislators and valued members of the community, on behalf of the MSD Warren Township Board, I extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to each of you gathered here today. It is an honor to host an important legislative forum where we can engage in meaningful dialogue and work together for the betterment of our community. We are particularly grateful to our legislators for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Your commitment to understanding the needs of our community and your willingness to listen to our concerns reflects your dedication to public service. It is through such collaboration that we can address the challenges we face and seize opportunity for growth and improvement. Today's forum is a testament to our shared vision for academic excellence. It's a chance for us, legislators, community members, and local leaders to come together to discuss key issues, exchange ideas, and explore solutions that benefit us all. I stand before you to use my voice for strong opposition to Indiana House Bill 1230, which proposes the elimination of nonpartisan designations on our ballots. At its core, our democracy thrives on the principles of transparency and informed choices. Nonpartisan designations help to ensure that voters can make decisions based on qualifications and character rather than being swayed solely by party affiliation. Removing these designations goes against the very essence of our informed electorate. This bill disregards the significant role of nonpartisan, such judges and school members that serve our community. These positions demand individuals who can rise above political divides and prioritize the needs of all citizens. By eliminating partisan labels, we risk obscuring the qualifications and stance of candidates, making it more challenging for voters to make educated choices. Furthermore, we must recognize the potential for increased partisanship that this bill invites. By forcing all candidates to a binary political framework, we risk polarizing our community and undermining our ability of diverse and independent voices to be heard. Let us not forget the strength of our democracy lies in diversity of thought, of experience, and of representation. We should be fostering an environment that encourages independent and critical thinking among our voters, not diminishing their ability to discern the best leadership for our communities. In conclusion, I urge you to reject Indiana House Bill 1230. Let us preserve nonpartisan designations on our ballots as a means of ensuring transparency, accountability, and informed decision-making. Together, we can uphold the integrity of our electoral process and empower every Hoosier to engage fully in our democracy. So, thank you. So with that, I'm going to go on and continue, and we're going to have Ryan Russell join us next.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to start off with the celebration this morning, and celebration isn't the goal that I projected on the screen, but the goal or the celebration is going to be talking about our literacy progress. A lot of that, obviously, with increased focus from the General Assembly on literacy and what that looks like in the state of Indiana. Specifically for us, just on a note, progress for us, I think, is best represented by this quote from C.S. Lewis: "It's getting nearer to the place where you want to be." So I'm not here today to say that we have arrived or that we ultimately have accomplished everything that we wanted, but we've certainly demonstrated the progress that we've made within literacy achievement here in Warren Township. The board's adopted a goal that by 2028, 92% of our students will be proficient on the iRead3 exam. And if you looked at that goal 7 or 8 years ago, you may have considered that even to be a little bit unrealistic, but I'm here today to show you how we've come, how we're getting significantly closer to that goal and the progress that we have made. Excuse me. This screenshot comes directly from the iGPS dashboard. So this gives an indication of where Warren Township has been since 2018. As you can see, as we come out of the pandemic, or as we've all come out of the pandemic, literacy has been a focus. And Warren Township's increased our iRead3 proficiency levels by 19% since that pandemic. You can clearly see us bending that curve, not only as we're nearing up certainly close, remarkably close to the state average, but that trajectory in terms of the progress that we've made in literacy has certainly been a celebration point for us, and has certainly been something that we celebrate and we continue to gain momentum on. So you may ask, what are some key actions, or what do we contribute a lot of this success or this progress towards? And these are just a few specific things that I want to take a few minutes just to highlight. One point of emphasis that I think is important to make is we really started our significant progress in 2019. We had identified that we were struggling for our students to demonstrate the achievement and growth in literacy, specifically early literacy, and that was identified earlier on. I say that because this really became more of a legislative trend. I know it's been referenced in the past, the Soul to Story podcast, and just the profound impact that that has had. That was published in 2022, August of 2022. So I say that because many school districts like Warren had identified that, and we're starting to work on that with more specificity earlier on. So at that time, we developed our own cadre to really explore the science of reading. And at that time, we specifically, and we still reference, lovingly reference to brain-based literacy, but we began that transformation then. That partnership for us really became trying to identify what I would refer to as an external expert to really help us identify our systems and structures around the teaching of reading. And we found that in Dr. Roxy Sporletter, who happens to continue to be an approved state provider of some of the training that goes on to the specific certification that the state is really looking at. We developed a comprehensive reading plan that really outlined our approach to teaching reading, that hit on some of those central aspects of what science of reading would look like. And it really defined everyone's actions and accountabilities within the complete picture of how we teach reading. And that doesn't just include teachers, but obviously include our students, our teachers, our parents, and our community, because our progress really is a representation of everyone's efforts in those areas. And it was clear for us to set those not only expectations, but set those practices and principles that we know would lead to that. We were provided a tremendous amount of support through the IDOE reading cadre. We jumped into that. All 9 of our elementary schools participated in that cadre. That was supported through us. Our external provider for us was CEL, which continued to provide the support and necessary focus that we needed to for that. We required science reading professional development for all teachers of reading. It seems like a no-brainer, develop teachers. But at the same time, that was significantly influenced and supported through us as we leveraged ESSER funds at the time to not only pay for that professional development, but to acknowledge our teachers' hard work within that with stipends for them. The increased opportunities for tutoring and summer remediation were a significant factor for us. We've doubled the amount of time that our students are receiving reading instruction outside the traditional 180 days of school. So that's after school tutoring. Our summer school specifically for literacy for our young learners, that time's been doubled as well. So we used to have remediation for a few weeks after the school year and called it summer school. We've now included and expanded that to be the entire month of June to help those students. And then, last but not least, as a high-level highlight, just the focus on family and community engagement and reading. Some of that's through community partnerships, some of that's through continuous communication, and then at the end of the day, it's really additional opportunities for parents and caregivers to talk to their staff about their child's reading progress. One such example of that would be we created additional parent-teacher conference opportunities specifically for third grade students so that they could have those critical conversations with their teachers about what specifically their child needed in order to meet that benchmark. The key factor ultimately, and I think this can't be understated, our progress in literacy is directly related to our teachers. Our teachers have done an absolutely fantabulous job on responding to the challenge, engaging in the professional development, applying that learning, and then really creating the instructional priority around that. Forward thinking, looking at Senate Bill 34. We are in support of Senate Bill 34 for a few reasons. This screenshot here on the right is just it comes from an IDOE memo of specifically what the components are required for the early literacy endorsement. And it all makes sense. There's things, and we certainly would not argue with anything around that. But Senate Bill 34 explicitly states that it reduces the certification training hours from 80 to 40. And you may be asking, if we want to improve literacy, why are we decreasing the amount of hours that we would actually want for certification for our students? What's not pictured on here is the rest of this memo with 16 pages of providers and all the different providers that could actually help a teacher get that endorsement. The problem is there are very few that are comprehensive where it's one training provider that can accomplish all elements A through I on this screenshot. So it really helps program providers to narrow their development focus, and a teacher looking to get that endorsement, which obviously everyone would need to, can identify one provider to be able to fully accomplish that. Without that, you're actually looking through a series of 2, sometimes 3 different professional development programs that you would actually have to participate in to be able to qualify for the endorsement. There's very few that are comprehensive to the point where you can gain all 80 hours with the right components, with word recognition, language comprehension, and writing. So it just clarifies, and it provides an easier access and completion point for staff. It supports the philosophy that certification is the starting point, not the goal. We can certify every single teacher, but ultimately what's going to make a difference is the ongoing job-embedded professional development and continual refinement of the practice. We have more success with the follow-up and coaching opportunities that we provide our teachers than we do the initial certification process for that. Teachers, like many other professions with certifications, they need opportunities and they need time to engage in that practice in their classroom, get feedback, and continue to improve. The actual starting point is something that provides a baseline foundation for everyone, but the follow-up and the continued support is most critical. And then certainly, as I mentioned a little bit before that, just reducing the complexity of opportunities for professional growth for teachers. There is a Key to Literacy program that's comprehensive, that provides everything. It isn't. The opportunities within Keys to Literacy, which you may be familiar with, are not sufficient for the number of Indiana teachers who need to get the endorsement. So it really expands the opportunities for teachers to enter in and participate in a plethora of different opportunities for teachers to be able to get that. So that bill, Senate Bill 34, really would provide a lot of support, not only for districts as they continue to support their teachers, but would provide a lot of support for teachers as they continue to participate in ongoing professional development for their endorsement and certifications. So at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions about literacy, or Senate Bill 34 support. Yep.
This morning. We are. There we go. Good morning. Thank you so much for your comments, and I think that we're listening, and I know that I'm in agreement. I mean, we're excited about Senate Bill 34. I think we took in teacher feedback, which is really important, and we know that that getting this right and improving literacy scores for all Hoosier kids is an iterative process, right? To make sure that that everybody's doing the great things that you all are doing here. We've got schools in all 92 counties that we've got to be thinking about as well, and so we appreciate your partnership in providing feedback, and we hope that we can get Senate Bill 34 across the finish line. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I would like to invite Allison Woods and James Taylor to talk about attendance.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the wonderful world of Warren. We're glad that you're here with us today. My name is James Taylor, Director of Student Services and the Director for the Moorhead Community Resource Center, and I'm standing before you today as Allison Woods, the Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, as her hype man. I'm here to hype her up. So what I want to say to you all is that we thank you for the hard work that you put into SEA 282 last year. It started out pretty rough, and basically we were able to sit down with Senator Donato, Senator Crider, Ms. Huntley, Senator Huntley, and to talk about those things that we didn't believe that worked for us as educators. And the senators and representatives were very cooperative, and they listened to us. I'm also here today to hype up what we're doing in Warren. We believe that we are a model school, so what Ms. Woods is going to present to you today pretty much talks about our successes over the last 2 to 3 years. I do want to pay homage because any system that you put in place, no matter what the pitfalls are, you have to have a champion to move it forward. So I want to salute and pay homage to my superintendent. He had a vision. My school board had a vision. They articulated that vision down to our assistant principals and our principals, and this is where we're at today. And I'll let Allison Woods be brief but brilliant in her presentation.
Thanks, James. James and I have worked closely over the last 3 years on attendance, and well before Senate Bill 282, attendance has been a priority for us. To build on what Ryan said, if students aren't here, they can't learn to read. So we need them here. So the hard work our teachers are doing is making an impact. This is just a visual of our average daily attendance for the past 3 years. So you can see the 22-23 school years in red. The gold middle line was last year, and this orange line is this year, with the exception of last January. Every year and every month we have increased our average daily attendance throughout the school year. And that is our incredible principals, assistant principals, counselors, family engagement liaisons, teachers, social workers. We talk so much about attendance. James and I spend so much work on attendance and talking about attendance and interventions and barriers, and really trying to find the reason students aren't at school and how we can support families and students to get them to school. This next slide is our chronic attendees. So we want to see this line going the opposite way. Our green line was 3 years ago, and that light blue line is where we are this year. We want to see our chronic attendees numbers go down, and we are making gains in that as well. So We have two different attendance plans, not different, overlapping. And in your folder, you have our comprehensive attendance plan for our district, as well as our response steps for our excessive absence and our unexcused absence plan. So this, looking at all absences, are the interventions that have happened this school year. We ask our teachers to make phone calls when students are out 3 days. We have a 5-day letter, so we look at all absences, excused or unexcused, because if you're missing school, you're missing school. They're all important. That parent phone call, so you see we've made over 3,000 parent phone calls this year. That is not a robocall. We have those every time your student is absent and we don't hear from you. Parents get notified. This is a person, a human being, picking up the phone, calling a family, talking to the family, why the student isn't here, how can we support. We've done that over 3,000 times this school year. We have a 10-day letter, family conferences. You can see that those, we have 1, 2, and 3 of those. We've had over 900 family conferences where school staff is sitting down with families and talking about why students are attending, how we can support, what we can put in place. We have attendance contracts in here. Way down at the bottom are our Tier 3 referrals. Weekly, we have a Tier 3 referral meeting where we staff every single student who has met that threshold, why they aren't coming to school, and what are our next steps. How can we get them here? What do we need to connect them with? Do we need to make a DCS report? What does that look like? We're talking about those students individually at a district level and responding and following up. So the Senate Bill 282 had some required steps that were put in place, and we have added additional steps in here. There's a required 5-day letter, which if you look at the language of the law, there is some required language that needs to be in there that is not so friendly. So we have a 3-day and a 4-day letter that has some school is important, but a little bit softer language before you get to that 5-day letter, letting parents know how they can report their child absent. We still have a significant number of unexcused absences because we just simply don't hear from families when their kids aren't here. That family student attendance plan that is required, we've had over 481 of those that have been complete, where our gen ed teacher, our assistant principal, and the family are sitting down and coming up with a plan to help get the student to school. They've done over 80 home visits. The prosecutor's office in Marion County requires that we do a home visit prior to a prosecutor's referral. And then the prosecutor referral there, we have referred 8 students, families to the prosecutor's office, and we have 10 that are pending. We're waiting for certified letters to come back and things like that. So some attendance challenges and recommendations I want to talk through. As a district, we are very fortunate to have ROWI. Those graphs at the beginning came from that. You know from Senate Bill 282 that the unexcused absences, we're looking at students in grades kindergarten through 6th grade, and we're looking at unexcused absences 5 days and 10 days within a rolling 10-week period. So I can't just look at this whole semester or this quarter. It's from today, 10 weeks backwards, and did they hit that 5 or 10 mark? Data-wise, if you don't have a system in place that can track that and work through identifying who those kids are, it's impossible. Really, ROWI, we're fortunate for that. For districts that don't have those systems in place, I'm not really quite sure how they do that, to be quite honest. And responding, all of those numbers that I showed you before, we are doing with existing staff. We have not added any staff that do attendance-only work. We don't have anybody that does attendance-only work. So our assistant principals, our family engagement liaisons, our principals, this has been added to, just their kind of daily task. And as you can see, we've made great gains. We have had great interventions and barriers removed for families and are getting kids to school. So that's working, and we're celebrating that. I'm going to let James talk a little bit about some of the things we're seeing in Marion County.
She gave me the hard part, because this is the part where I point fingers. We have an exceptional relationship with DCS. Let it be known that we see DCS as a major partner. We also have an exceptional relationship with our prosecutor, Prosecutor Mears, and we also have a great relationship with probation. However, when 282 was crafted, It did not look at the collaboration. It talks about the collaboration among agencies, among schools, in the community, but it did not actually help the prosecutor's office and DCS understand what their task is. They are over inundated, overcapacitated, all of those things with the flood of referrals that come from people. And when I say people, I mean the people who are actually servicing the kids, not understanding what attendance is. I'm going to say something to Senator Kreider, who has been a champion for mental health. Attendance is mental health. We look at 4 major categories when working with attendance. We look at school refusal, school withdrawal, school avoidance, and actual truancy itself. All 4 of those things mean something different. What we've done in Warren is that we've lived by the science and evidence-based practices. We've been working on this for years. I want to attribute Dr. Carolyn Janetti, an international researcher, in helping us to find our place in this field. But even our superintendent, Dr. Hansen, had to sit down and understand what it means for attendance to run through the vein of what we do in our schools. If kids aren't here, they can't learn. Now, DCS and the prosecutor's office is so important because we're looking for the impact. What is the biggest impact that we can say that has taken place with our families within this last 2 years? And I'm going to say to you all, based on my practice, it's working with our families. That's why we created the parent engagement positions. That's why we love our counselors in our school district. When we work with our families, when we support our families and not report our families to the juvenile justice system, that's saying that we're meeting the basic needs of our community so that we can be successful academically. That's what our job is. That's why the relationship with DCS and the prosecutor's office is so important. Now, don't get it twisted. You heard some very low numbers from her about the number of people that were referring to the prosecutor's office. We don't want to refer our families to the prosecutor's office. This is the change of paradigm that we're promoting in Indiana. We want to help our families. We want to pour into Tier 1 and to Tier 2 all of the resources that we possibly can so that our families can't get to Tier 3. It's bad enough that Indiana is leading the state and the country in evictions, and I love the new proposal of the law coming out to expunge evictions. For every one family that goes into an eviction court, there's 5 kids. So the impact of our relationship with DCS and the prosecutor's office is so important. We have the luxury of having a great relationship. And Senator Huntley, like you said, most school districts don't have that relationship. So I speak not just on what we do in Warren, I speak for the state of Indiana. Thank you.
So a couple current bills I want to talk about. House Bill 1540. I love that we're talking about attendance in Tier 1, 2, and 3. If you see our plan, we really do have very intentional things for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Some concerns I have with this bill are putting in some additional required steps of meetings and conferences and actions that as a school district we need to take that then also overlap with that Senate Bill 282 that is going to cause some duplicative efforts. I support having school districts turn in attendance plans to the state with having Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 measures in it. What I'd ask is to have the flexibility for us to identify those steps, those interventions, what they look like, rather than having those laid out and dictated in that bill. House Bill 1201, we support the increase of moving from 5 days. So for the unexcused absences, once a student has missed 5 days unexcused, we have 5 school days to have that family parent conference meeting. If the parent can't make it in 5 school days, we have it without the parent. we support the change to increase that to 10 school days. We have parents that can't always make it, and we want to be able to be collaborative partners with them and, give time for those to happen and be quality conversations. I do have some concerns around the suspension and the expulsion. We support not suspending students for attendance. I will say that especially for our older students, when we are having the prosecutor's office doesn't take those older student referrals. DCS is screening out most of our attendance referrals, and getting students in, getting families in to try to offer them some support. We are exploring, not expelling students, but bringing them in for an expulsion hearing to be able to connect them for services. Right now, I'm talking for students that we can't get in another way, and we are hoping that that might just bring them in the door so we can talk to them and get them connected with services. The other thing I want to bring up, and this is not a current bill, but I know there's discussion about expanding the unexcused work to grades 7 and 12. James talked about the importance of that interagency collaboration, and we're struggling with that right now. We have fantastic relationships with the prosecutor's office and DCS, but I mentioned most of our K-6 referrals, even for DCS, are screened out. I told you we have 8 referrals that we've sent to the prosecutor's office starting in September. None of those have gotten in front of a judge. Besides a letter from a parent, those aren't being seen or heard. If you go to Hamilton County or Lake County, those families are getting in front of a judge, are being held accountable. We do not send families to the prosecutor's office unless that is our only and very last resort. And as you guys representing Marion County, and I know we have to look at what's best for the whole state, but it's not okay that it's more important for kids in Hamilton and Lake County to come to school than it is for our students in Marion County. So I would just like for us to consider before we expand to other grades that we really make sure that all the systems and the interagency collaboration is working in that K-6 space. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time. You want to say anything? Sorry, is that that?
What she said, yeah.
I'll step in real quick.
Yeah.
I appreciate the data that you've provided. Just for my education, could you quickly define what the chronic how chronic is defined?
So chronic is looking at a student missing 10% of the school year.
Okay.
So that denominator is always changing. You could be a chronic student in August when there's only 20 days of school, but your attendance increases and that chronic can change.
Okay, thank you. And
Yeah.
so when you're doing a lot of tracking, and it's not to ask you to do more, but when you are, working with students and working with families, are you also tracking the drivers of why they aren't being there? I mean, I think it would be helpful, I think especially on I'm speaking for the city council side, the city side, and how, as we all know, school corporations and the administration of that in our state is much different than in other states. And so the role of city and or county government, we're the combination of the two, our role in education is not super well defined. And so I appreciate Mr. Taylor's calling in the eviction crisis that we have. It's the most visible driver of what is housing instability in our city, and as I know especially in Warren Township. So I just think in the future it could be helpful for us to kind of have some of that data.
I can share that with you.
Yeah, that would be really helpful because I think it would help really give us on the city side a better mandate of how we can support you. So that's just a kind of a call to action on that.
Let me tell you how you can support us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Since I have county officials here, and this is very important, now I'm speaking specifically in Marion County, and like Allison said, throughout our state, different jurisdictions that deal with JDAI, and those of you that know what JDAI is, they look at it in different ways. So JDAI always looks to make sure that the numbers are okay when talking about juvenile offenses. The goal is to keep kids out of the juvenile justice system. With that being said, as we're spinning numbers, sometimes when we spin numbers and we focus on those crimes that reach the higher level of safety, we tend to look lesser on the status offenses. Now, in Marion County specifically, the change in the juvenile justice court has hurt us tremendously. I can speak to that side. I can speak to the probation side, the school side, and the DCS side because we work very closely with all of them. Meaning that when she said that our kids aren't getting in front of a judge, no one is getting in front of a judge unless they've been adjudicated on a crime, okay? And then they will lump truancy in with that crime, okay? So we do have kids that have dual status, meaning that if you commit a crime and you're also in DCS, we have a chance of seeing that kid for attendance problems. But in general, if a kid has an attendance problem without committing a crime, there's no way in Marion County that they're going to get in front of a judge to get the support that they need. Okay? So if you all can give us some assistance in understanding the complexity of how the family court operates, because it's been a private Illuminati type thing and nobody knows who they report to. Okay? So that would help us. Accountability is the key. And if judges have no accountability to the people that they serve, we have a problem here. So thank you, Andy.
Okay, thank you. Teacher compensation, I'm guessing that's Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Simpkins, Chief Human Resource Officer. It's good to be with you this morning. Dr. Hansen mentioned that we are the second largest employer on the Far East Side. So on behalf of the good working people of Warren Township Schools, I thank you for your service and what you do. In the past couple of years, I've addressed staffing and recruitment and retention challenges and opportunities. Those still remain today, but today I'm going to focus a little bit more narrowly on teacher compensation, particularly from an HR lens. So just by way of just background, for the every July we have to turn into ERB through the state gateway a collective bargaining report, which is due by July 31st every year. So based on that report, the average Warren teacher salary is $60,731. So I just wanted to put that up there because I know right now there's a lot of talk about average salaries and getting those up to a certain mark, which is an important consideration. Also, starting pay for this year, we have, for those who with a bachelor's degree and 0 years of experience, it's $50,500. And for masters and 0 years of experience, it's $51,500. So I just wanted to make that known as well, just for your reference. I know there's a lot of talk about also getting starting salaries up to a certain point, which is also a very valuable conversation. Going ahead here, I have the last 5 years of teacher raises. These are all actual flat dollar amounts, not percentage raises, which has been pretty customary going all the way back to my rookie year of HR was 2013-14. That fall of 13 was the first bargaining contract that we did after the 2011 legislation. If you recall, for decades prior to that, teacher compensation was largely the steps and lanes. So even if there was no money for a raise, you still went up a step, so to speak. Or if you got a master's degree, you went up a step and over a lane and so on. So really, since the 13-14 school year, it's been year by year negotiations, no steps and lanes. And those have typically been flat dollar amounts across the board for teachers. You can see here in particular, contract year 2022, 23, and 24 have been the highest since that 2013-14 school year, 3 straight years of consecutively the highest teacher raises across the board that we've been able to negotiate. And so we really do appreciate the funding from the General Assembly that was appropriated for schools to do that, because when we bargain, we all, both the Teacher Association and us, we want to bargain like champions and try to get as big a raise for our teachers as we can. So particularly the 23-24 school year was definitely far and away a record amount. This past school year was a little bit more challenging given that second year budget appropriation, but I was happy to be able to negotiate the raise that we did. And so that's just a little 5-year look back on the teacher raises across the board. Now that's a good segue into total compensation. As HR for all employees, I like to occasionally remind all staff how you can go to our employee portal and check not just your salary, but above and beyond your salary, what the Board of Education contributes on your behalf. This, what you see here, is part of what I cover with teachers in July for our big summer new teacher orientations as we hire teachers up. What you see here is a teacher more or less probably coming out of college, a bachelor's degree and 0 years of experience, starting at $50,500 for their salary, but then you see all the other elements that are contributed on their behalf. This would be a teacher on a single plan for insurance. And that total compensation, as you can see, is $72,000 plus. And so that may seem obvious. I mean, we all work and we know that. But when you see it in those stark terms, when you really come to think about it, that really goes a long way, particularly from HR in terms of a retention piece. And so one of the great parts of my job, frankly, is going behind the scenes and working hard to get the best benefits for our folks. And I know there's talk, too, at various levels of government about paid time off, other types of things, as I'll comment on in a minute, even time, even a worker's day, a teacher's day, is also very important. So there's a lot of those types of things beyond salary that are very important. So I just wanted to show this as an illustration of the bigger picture behind, because even with bargaining, there's a lot that we have to go through with respect to health insurance benefits. All of it has a bearing on the overall pot that's available for salaries when we negotiate. So on the bottom here, you can see that in addition to this, the great majority of teachers are on a single health insurance plan with a health savings account. So we've had a long-standing bargaining component whereby we do a match up to $300 for those on a single plan as an employer HSA contribution. We also, the board contributes to their 401A. We also have the 403B match, and also there's the VEBA HRA piece that is a retirement piece that the board also contributes on an employee's behalf in order to have an account to spend on health insurance premiums and in retirement. So that's the big picture. A lot of these bills here that I'm referencing, I'm not necessarily advocating either way, but I just feel like just providing some background information. Of course, Senate Bill 34 has been addressed by Mr. Russell quite well. I only bring it up because we are required in the fall of 2025 in collective bargaining to bargain differentiated stipends for those who have the literacy endorsement. And so anything that can help, we are going to help. Of course, teachers have to take professional responsibility to do what they need to do, but we also want to help teachers where we can to get over that finish line. And anything that can be done to help expedite that, help make that more simpler, make that balance of having the endorsement mean something, but also be able to get it done timely and not have it be an excessive burden is really important. So I say that because we're going to have to round up probably by the end of the school year, just kind of keep tabs on where our people are in that process so that we can be prepared for bargaining. Senate Bill 146, I believe, is one that Governor Braun has some involvement in, is promoting. So I know paid parental leave, that's a big topic. And so that's also part, bargainable with respect to teachers. But I know that we're also looking at paternity leave. And so, I can just state briefly in Warren Township how it works is when a mother is having a baby, that there's a short-term disability period, 6 or 8 weeks if it's a C-section delivery, whereby they're allowed to use all their paid sick leave during that window of time. Anything beyond that is essentially FMLA, unpaid, to bond with the child. We do, though, have in our bargaining agreement a paternity leave match. We will match up to 5 days for any teacher that puts in 5 of their own or more. So if you're a teacher and you have a baby and you're on maternity leave and you have 10 sick days, we will match another 5 with that. So then now you have 15 paid sick days to use in that period, just as an example. So that's kind of how we do that. I know there's been proposals for expanding that. Yes.
Yeah, Brian, can I ask you a quick question about
Sure.
that? So for those who don't know, in Senate Bill 146, the proposal right now is that for full-time employees, there would be 20 days of paid leave that would be outside of
Sick
or-
days, right.
sick days or any other days that you would have. My question for you is, how will that impact? You said you've got a finite overall pocket of money for teacher compensation, and so how will that impact your ability to compensate teachers?
I mean, if there's no funding with that, it will be a big impact because we are actually, we have a lot of teachers that are in their first 5 years of experience. And so we have a lot of babies, a lot of families. And so, I mean, I've had recent years where we've had 37, 39 maternity leaves.
Yeah, I had two
so-
babies in my first 5 years of teaching,
Yeah,
so
there you go,
thanks to
okay.
my district for giving me time off. But so I think that what would be helpful for us to know, and so if you could get this to us at a later time, would be an anticipated budgetary impact that it would have, so that we can continue to advocate when it comes to our budget to make sure that we are taking all of that into account. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a great point. And so, yeah, obviously we're interested in looking at that and see how it plays out. I mean, we are very family friendly in Warren, and so we do want to, the parental leave, the 5 days that we match, that's huge. In fact, parents, fathers who are also given that match when they want to bond with their child too. So that's very popular, and it's a very important thing. It goes a long way towards being family friendly, being flexible, and helps towards retention. The Teacher Appreciation Grant, that's money appropriated by the General Assembly and administered by the DOE. We usually get those funds about Thanksgiving, and we get those stipends out to teachers by before Christmas break. In Warren Township, we do differentiate a 25% differential between a highly effective teacher and an effective teacher with those Teacher Appreciation Grant stipends. But we also spread that, all teachers that are eligible get that across all our buildings. I know the law allows for specific buildings or specific teachers, and I know this proposed legislation also would help target those stipends towards hard to staff or difficult to staff positions, namely special ed or multilingual education. So I would like to do both things, walk and chew gum, and be able to continue to spread those out, but then also focus on, frankly, those difficult to fill positions. And again, there's the minimum salary discussion about getting that up to 45, but as I just pointed out, we're above that. Mandatory discussion, again, just so you know, discussion, of course, was not mandatory any longer. It's all over the place. I know in some districts, it's discussion is, the superintendent having breakfast once a month with the union president. That's discussion, and all over the place. Now in Warren Township, we kind of kick it old school. We still have the monthly discussions that we traditionally have, and really is for a district our size, it's really one of the best ways to do business, frankly, because you have a shared agenda. You have a meeting, scheduled monthly meetings on the books. And of course, we encourage building level discussion, but at the district level, we're talking about district types of issues, working conditions issues, issues that impact student discipline, curriculum and instruction, professional development, all those types of things that aren't bargainable. And so we're proud of that, and that's just kind of how we do it in Warren Township. Collective bargaining, one of the essential parts of my job description is to be keeper of the contract. I have to do my best to maintain diplomacy between all parties. And so with collective bargaining, there's the Senate Bill 230 with regard to injecting school safety matters and any related working conditions with that. And so I would just point out that in our discussion we do have a standing agenda item for health and safety issues. So either administration or the local association on our agenda, that's a standing agenda item. And so we handle those issues in discussion. This year in particular, and we have, just for the record, we have also, once we got out of bargaining, we quickly pivoted and we formed a what we call Teacher Employment Guidelines Committee. Years ago when I started, like I said, the collective bargaining law changed and a lot of those working conditions things were taken out and put in a teacher employment guidelines document, which has been reformed and changed over the years. But we're looking right now, I mentioned teacher time. We are making good progress on just looking at the teacher day, teacher contract time, and how can we maximize teacher time in such a way that in turn also improves student achievement. So those are great discussions we're having. Also, as a district committee, we have teachers working on a district evaluation committee. So outside of bargaining, outside of discussion, we also have these district level committees whereby administration and teachers are working together on some really, really important issues. Teacher compensation from Senate Bill 249. I mentioned that just because it mentions supplemental stipends, and just so you know, for the record, we have, given the flexibility from state law in recent years, have done supplemental stipends. Originally, it was for like STEM-related positions, so we started with our school psychologists. We've extended that to like speech-language pathologists and so on. We also have one-time, those are annual stipends above and beyond their salary. We also have a series of stipends that are one-time stipends to attract difficult-to-fill positions. So for instance, if you're going to teach high school math, when you get hired on, we have a $2,000 bonus one time. We have various bonuses for difficult-to-fill positions. So we have made use of that in Warren Township, and we'll just keep our eye on how that all works, because that would be tied to possibly the bargaining pot, is how I understand that legislation. Finally, I just want to mention House Bill 1326. It does have, by way of supporting certain applicants that are in a transition to teaching program with scholarships. I know that that's income-based, but I highlight that primarily to just suggest, as I have in the past, that anything we can do to support getting people who are interested in teaching to avoid debt and to have kind of a nice fast track, whether it's an alternative path or through a traditional college or university, either way, to be able to go through those pathways to become a teacher and not have it be too burdensome financially. So those are the extent of my remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes.
Thank you. Good morning. Very great presentation. State Senator Lakeisha Jackson, I want to apologize to you for being late. The day's bittersweet. I have a funeral for one of my best friend's mom today, and then immediately after the services, we're having a birthday party for my mom's turning 70. But I would not slight you all, so apologize for the lateness. But my first question is, I know we're talking about House bills here, but this goes back into last year and then the year before, because I think I've been here for every year you invited me. I see recruitment is not on the agenda. You probably are trying to cut the agenda short, but is this a good place for me to talk about recruitment?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So specifically minority recruitment, because it goes back into teacher compensation, especially for those that we're trying to recruit. What do you have any numbers before you today on a changeover in numbers from the last year to where we're talking to today?
I can get those for you.
Okay, and
Yeah.
specifically blacks,
Yep.
And then black males.
I can tell you that right now our teacher force is 17%, a little over 17% African American.
And then do you know how many of those are black males or African American males?
I can get that for you. I just don't, not offhand.
You just know total, that's it. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And then the next thing is I run into a lot of people, no particular race or gender, that just say, hey, or their parents, my child is about to graduate, they're looking at teaching. Senator Jackson, can you convince them to teach here locally in Indiana, specifically Warren or Lauren Township? And I'll start to spill because I get to come to your legislative updates on why they should teach. I can't say a preference anyway, but why it's great to teach here in Indianapolis. And so is there a website? Is there, where do they go to find, like, just, I know you can't be maybe this transparent on the compensation, but if there's a youth, not a youth, a young adult that's about to graduate from college or coming back transiting back to Indiana, and like, I really talked hard to one young lady. Her mom is like an exec at one of the organizations, and she's like, Senator Jackson, I want her to teach here. She wants to teach in Houston, and I really just gave her the 411 of why she should teach here.
Thank you.
But I couldn't direct her anywhere. Where can we direct her? What information can you give us as legislators or anyone to direct to help with your recruitment? Thank you.
Yes, well, I appreciate that because right now, there's no question, and we have a lot of building leaders who know this too, that we are consistently hiring folks who didn't go to college to major in education. We have several pipelines in place where we are hiring once they've proven themselves, but we have a lot of folks that are instructional assistants, for instance, who some don't even have a bachelor's degree, but we are developing pipelines whereby we are getting them on track to become teachers. So there's a lot of short-term, long-term, inside-outside game, developing your own, growing your own. But then for folks on the outside who have a college degree, I mean, first and foremost, our public website has all the information that you would want to know. But a couple things. One, certainly, if you are interested in teaching, depending on your background and experience, we hire all the time teachers who get on an emergency permit or go through a transition to teaching program. So we welcome anybody who's interested in either doing a career change or has come out of college and wants to teach. If they are hired as a support staff employee, there are ways over time to, if they with a recommendation from their principal, for instance, and some good evaluations. Some of our support staff employees are very tied to the community, and we have several that have gone on to become pathways to teachers and are great teachers. So, but getting on an emergency permit, and we will do what we need to do to get them licensed and over the finish line with that respect. So there are nowadays so many different ways that folks can become teachers, and so that's kind of an exciting development. It's a little scary too, but also exciting. Oh, one other thing, shameless plug. We will be advertising next week for our teacher recruitment fair that we do. So it's a hybrid, it's virtual opportunities, and as well as in-person interviews. So that's going to be February 26th. So if you know somebody who wants to teach in Warren Township, our Warren Teacher Fair, teacher recruitment event is going to be on February 26th.
Senator Jackson, Pam Griffin, could you stand up? Pam Griffin, 317.
Oh, good. Hold on.
869-4350.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Direct contact.
Thank you.
We'll take care of anyone who's interested.
Because you know I'll get it to you. I'm direct contact. Thank you.
Yes, we have various partnerships with several different universities. We have various partnerships with programs, like I said, that are part of our pipeline to get even support staff and those who don't have a full bachelor's degree yet, even into the teaching force. So if there's a will, there's definitely a way. And if someone's interested and someone's got what it takes to be a teacher, we have a way to do it, and we will embrace those individuals. And okay, thank you. I'm going to invite now to the podium Melissa Gogol, representing our Warren Education Association.
I asked him if there was a step stool. God, what are you thinking? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I go by Missy. Melissa's my professional name, I guess, but I go by Missy. I am currently the intensive mental health teacher within our. It's a program within our OEL at the Renaissance School. I have worked in Warren Township for over 28 years. This is my 33rd year in teaching. I am the first vice president of the Warren Education Association. I have been affiliated with the Warren Education Association since I have been in Warren Township. I've had several different roles, including discussion chair, an association rep within our buildings. I've been a teacher leader. I've done a lot of different things. I'm old school. So some of these bills that are coming out you're going back to being old school, which I'm liking. So our literacy endorsement, one of the things Mr. Russell, he hit on is we here in Warren Township, we have professional development yearly, monthly, semester, daily, whatever we want in order to work on our literacy. As a teacher in special education and as a teacher of 33 years, eliminating that 80 hours and an endorsement, bringing it down to 40, and then having to take a praxis. For me, it's discouraging to have to take a praxis again when I have already shown through data and my professional development. I don't discourage learning. I think learning is very important, but it would help eliminate costs that teachers already have when they're trying to get the hours that they need in order for them to keep their licensure. So we really are in support of the bill of working it down to 40 hours and eliminating that extra test that teachers may have to take. I'm using my technology here, so excuse me, with my notes. The school counselors. School counselor in a building is very, very vital. They are the glue that keeps things together, not only for the teachers and the administrators, but especially for the students. In our district alone, our counselors are they're the first line of defense when something is wrong with a student. As a teacher, I can go to that counselor and say, hey, I think Johnny's having some problems. Can you get him into the office? Eliminating extra duties that they have to do, testing, filling out data on what they do, what classes, being able to really work directly with a child is the most important. We're very much in support of them bringing that back to having a counselor be a counselor. Teacher compensation. Who doesn't like teacher compensation? We are very much in support of equal paid leave for parents and increasing the minimum salary to at least $45,000. We are very fortunate in Warren Township to have a starting teacher salary at $50,000. And as part of the bargaining team, we strive to really increase that yearly. One of the concerns that we have, though, the teacher appreciation grant. As Mr. Simpson stated, there is a discrepancy between those that are highly effective and those that are effective. We already do that here in Warren Township. If we want to make it specifically for just certain teachers, other teachers, what are we going to work for? If I'm only going to give that to math teachers and science teachers and special ed teachers and counselors who are teachers, what's going to happen to the other teachers? How are they going to be compensated? So that's just something to think about for this bill. School safety, which I think is the next one, and working conditions discussions. We are so lucky to be in Warren and be teachers in Warren, because not only can we discuss that at a district level, but we have the opportunity to discuss it with our principals. We can walk into our principal and say, hey, this isn't going right. What can we do? How can we fix it? How can we plan? We do that. That needs to continue and needs to be added in, and all schools need to be able to discuss that because we work as a team. I was always taught it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to run a school. So we need to be able to discuss things together. Continuing to bargain with working conditions as well, the bargaining in school safety. Not only should school safety be something that's discussed every day in some cases to make sure we're all doing it correctly and protecting everyone, but it needs to be able to be bargained. Bargaining going back to the olden days when I first started. You discussed working conditions, you discussed class sizes, because believe it or not, class size not only affects the child's learning, but it also affects children's safety. So adding those in would be something great. Keeping that, letting us bargain those types of things again, putting that in. Right now, we only bargain salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits. And we can only discuss, if you have discussion, safety, size of your class, what you're teaching, those types of things. Putting that back in the bargaining unit would be phenomenal. Some concerns that we have, definitely, the qualifications for the Secretary of Education. Secretary of Education needs to know a little bit about education to be considered the secretary of it. You need to know to represent. Removing grant programs and those fundings. If we remove grant programs, how are we going to fund our schools and fund the programs that we want to be innovative, that we are asked by the state to do and make education exciting, especially in the 21st century when everything is on the computer, and that's more exciting than me. So we need to have the funding for those grants. 1136, do I really need to talk about it? I live in Marion County. I teach in Warren Township, right beside IPS. Eliminating a school district would be detrimental to a community. I'm all for, looking and trying to do what's better and get betters, but you can't destroy a school system. You cannot take away a school board who was elected by the people to represent their community and the education in the community. Charter schools, I'm gonna put on my soapbox. They sound really good, but as a special education teacher, they don't provide what special education needs. I have several students that come to me that were at charter schools, but because they weren't behaving appropriately, got removed, and they come to us. And guess what? We're the public school. We take every student, and all schools should take every student. Eliminating a gun-free zone. I teach at 30th and Post. Do you think I want people coming in that are having guns on them? No. That would not be a good idea. That would infringe on my safety as well as the safety of my students I teach. So as you can see, it's a big concern. Facilities and transportation pilot programs, similar in the sense that being told how to use facilities in your own district is not a really good idea. We've tried this once before in the state years ago when we were taking over schools and telling them what they can and can't do. That didn't go so hot. We need to really think, what are we doing? Because, I know most of you represent the state of Indiana, but those of you that represent Marion County, we know how hard it is right now in Marion County for our youth. Schools are their safety zones. As an educator, my husband's been an educator. He works here as well. We've been in together. I think we have 65 years of education experience. We love Warren Township. We love Marion County. We love the state of Indiana. But we have to do what's best for kids, not just what's best for us as adults. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have my button. There we go. Missy, thank you for your presentation. I want to offer, well, first, I want to point out an observation that all the concerning bills are coming from the House. So those of us in the Senate, we're doing a really good job recommending. But I want to offer another perspective on Senate Bill 146 on the teacher compensation, specifically on the grant part, because I lifted up exactly what you said to the Secretary of Education, to Secretary Jenner. And what she explained to me is that the goal was to, instead of having the teacher appreciation grants be a participation prize, essentially, to really allow districts to get creative about how they retain teachers. And so there's been research about teacher retention and compensation, and that getting $200 doesn't do much to retain someone, but getting $2,000 makes a difference. And so trying to allow more flexibility with that pot of money, grow the pot that's available for teacher retention by kind of narrowing who it can be for, in terms of, like, it's not going to be for the coach in the building, but it would be for the people who are, working directly with students more on a day-to-day basis. But the part about special education services and E&L services, it does say in there that it's the teacher of record or the teacher of service. And so I point that out because what I said to the secretary was, well, almost everyone in the building is a teacher of service.
Exactly.
And she said, yes. And so it's really to allow you all to have more flexibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too with the teacher appreciation grants, we do a really good job in Warren. Like they said, if you are a teacher who is effective or highly effective, they do separate it in that way. I think one of the things we also have to know, every district gets a different amount of money.
Yes.
And that's something I think that needs to be worked on. Because just because my test scores may not be the same as everybody else's, that's outside the county, the outside the county may get more money than what the inside the county does. So, we need to really look at those types of things as well. There's poor districts out there who are struggling, not just city districts, county districts.
Yes.
And we really need to look at that. And I think with Senator Jenner and Secretary Jenner, what she's wanting to do, she needs to make that clear in that bill then.
Yeah.
Because what there's the intent and the letter. A lot of people look at the letter, they don't look at the intent. We need to actually know what is said. I think that's if that's the way it's supposed to be, yes. But we need to really have that in that bill.
I would love to look at it again with you, because if we can, amend it, we're still in the process, to make that clear. I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Clayton.
Good morning, and again, thank you for taking time out of your Saturday morning to come join us, and thank you for your great service to the state of Indiana. Briefly, I just want to, again, being respectful of everyone's time, I want to talk about a few things around school safety. Obviously, this requires everyone's full attention. It receives a lot of attention locally and nationally, but school safety, specifically the importance of building a culture of school safety, is something that here in Warren Township we are very committed to. I've had the honor and privilege the last 2 to 3 years, to speak to this body specifically about school safety. And it's important to just understand the evolution of school safety and how do we define that in 2025, because for many of us that went to school a long time ago, it's different. I remember when I went to school, the doors were open. There was no such thing as locked doors. No one knew what school hardening meant. Our focus primarily was on drills, making sure that we were able to evacuate kids and shelter kids in the event of a severe storm. But when you talk about building a culture of safety, understand this. And my college professor, Dr. Steve Gruner, who's an expert on climate and culture, he always told us that if we want to change climate, we can do that just by changing a light bulb. We can do that immediately. But if we're talking about cultural change, that's typically a 3 to 5 year process. When you're talking about changing the culture of school around safety, that's been a 30+ year process. So just understand that. And specifically, we have a number of our outstanding principals here today. For the majority of our principals, when they were trained, whether it was in education as a teacher or as a building leader, as they serve now, they weren't trained as school safety specialists. They've had to become school safety specialists just because everything we do when we talk about culture, that means everyone has a role in safety. Our educators, our teachers that work with our students every day, they've had to become school safety specialists. Our school safety officers, our school resource officers that provide support, and then our students. They've had to learn what does it mean to be a part of a safe school culture, because they have a part, they have a role, which I will touch on. But here in Warren Township, we have worked tremendously hard to focus on what that culture needs to look like. And we base it around a district framework. And this is where we make our investments, because the other thing I'll briefly touch on is how are you using the investments that we have? How are we using the grants? That should be a question that everyone is asked, because we embrace accountability when it comes to each and every dollar that we receive. But our district framework is based on really 5 principles: physical safety, emotional, psychological safety, health safety, crisis preparedness, and community engagement. So just to touch on those things briefly, physical safety, as you know, that's protection from violence. We do a lot of work. We have a system in place in terms of how we deal with bullying, threats, how we secure our buildings, using, whether it's through grants or through our operations fund, to truly enhance our safety protocols. Now, the next two, emotional and psychological safety and health safety, I will leave part of that to our next presenter, Ms. Laura Buckwright, because she's going to talk about what that safety framework looks like from a supportive standpoint with the emotional and the healthy side of it. But even down to our food service program, our child nutrition program, we talk about safety as it relates to what our students put into their bodies. Crisis preparedness, that's our emergency plans, how we deal with natural disasters, active shooter situations, and health crisis, which we dealt with a health crisis a few years ago. And then as well as community engagement. You cannot have a serious safety plan if you fail to engage your community. And through the leadership of our board and our superintendent, specifically around our referendum discussions, we engage our community multiple times, and we ask them, what do we need to do? What do we need to invest in as a school community to make sure that our students are safe? And they provided a lot of insight and a lot of great ideas. So again, when we redefine what this means in 2025, what it comes down to is that all of us, everyone in this room, we are partners in protection. And I repeat that, we are partners in protection. And again, that speaks to the cultural piece. Our local and state and federal government lawmakers, obviously you guys know the role that you play in this. And part of that is whether it's our board, superintendent, our administrators that are here, teachers, parents, everyone that's in this room today, students, it involves the ability to conversate, have courageous conversation, feedback. That is the thing that connects all of us, is our ability to communicate with one another around safety. And we do that here within our district. We work with our building leaders. We make sure that we try to make investments, because the school that's on the south edge of town or south end of the district versus the school that's on the north end of the district, their needs may be a little bit different. Now, there are some consistencies which I'll touch on that we invest in, but again, we are partners in protection. Everyone has a role. So in 2025, we have to engage in those conversations. We have to define those roles and what that looks like. As you can see from a funding standpoint, we were very fortunate that in 2018 and then also in 2023, through a renewal, we were able to pass a referendum. And that's been a godsend to this district as it pertains to safety. As you know, again, when we talk about the evolution of what this culture looks like, 20, 30 years ago, a lot of those operational dollars were focused more on capital projects. Now, between operational funds, and Matt Parkinson will talk to you more in depth about that, but school districts and boards have had to make tough choices now because dollars now have, more and more dollars are being diverted towards school safety. More and more dollars are being diverted towards school safety. Dollars that principals have access to, some of those dollars have to be diverted towards safety. Everything we do now has a safety component, and guess what? As that demand goes up, those prices have a tendency to go up with it as well when it comes to making those investments. But as you can see, what we have expenditure, and this is what we committed to our district in terms, to our community as it relates to what we will allocate towards safety each and every year. And you can see what we have appropriated for this year as well as what we've done over the last 5 to 6 years. And for us, and again, Mr. Parkinson will touch on it, but this is going towards, the majority of it's going towards the wages and benefits of our school resource officers, school safety officers, as well as vehicles and supplies, because for us as a district with a statutory police department, that requires us to invest in our people in our department to make sure they have what they need to serve and protect our students and our community. So just a couple questions around that. What percentage of our operations budget does school safety make up? And again, we have moved most of our school safety costs to our referendum. If we didn't have the referendum, it would be about 5% of that overall budget. It serves about, it's around 13% of our referendum budget, school safety is. That's pretty high because again, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. That level of investment that is required around safety. But again, we embrace that, we invite that, and we're looking for opportunities to improve that or increase that. How has increased spending in school safety affected the district budget? Substantially. We pay for school safety out of the same pot of money that we pay for bus drivers, student devices, and more. We're always going to fund student safety, but we have to recognize the trade-offs on our other priorities. Again, we have to make tough decisions around the way that we invest and spend towards all of those areas, but specifically with safety. As I mentioned, we have about 1.6 million allocated there, and I mentioned the 13%. Is it fair to say that any modifications to the operations fund, as we try to expand statewide what we provide to charter schools, specifically a decrease in funding will directly have an impact on school safety? Absolutely. The operations and operating referendum funds are so closely linked. A reduction in operation revenue will have a cascading impact by putting pressure on everything funded out of either fund. So I challenge this group as we look for creative ways to support all students in all 92 districts throughout the state. We have to make sure that we do it in a way that is responsible and that we're not taking from one to give to the other. Because as it relates to safety, that could be the matter of life and death. We talked about grants. Grants are huge. And Senator Jackson, I appreciate the two bills that you've authored, 67, Senate Bill 67 and Senate Bill 190, providing opportunities for schools to have access to funds to provide training, because that's a big component of it when we talk about crisis preparedness, as well as trying to reduce school violence. We truly appreciate that. And also the opportunities for grassroots organizations, because as you know, Mr. Taylor, probably not so much in this presentation, but you know, much of what he does at the Moorhead Community Resource Center is work with grassroots organizations around safety and bringing those organizations to help support our students in our community. So providing access to funds is essential to what we do. So as you look at what we've been privileged to receive through the Secure Safety Grant, the last 3 years, We have about 81,000. We got a little bit less this time around, but we will use that in a way that will go directly towards those safety initiatives. And then you see what we've been able to access through the COPS grant and what we're awarded in those and I can, again, showing you fences, radios, security alarms, rekeying, because again, when we think of safety, sometimes we just think of, okay, a secured entrance. Yes, that's part of it. We think of a school resource officer. Yes, that's part of it. We think of, emergency preparedness. Yes, that's part of it. But again, when you look at fences, when you look at communication devices, when you look at evacuation plans, it's expensive. Okay, again, that's the holistic approach. We just rekeyed our high school because, when you go about 30, 40 years and you have the same keys floating around and people leave, that becomes a safety issue. That took us about 2 years to put that together, and it's not a cheap venture. Again, and Ms. Gogol touched on it, I'm just going to take a look at the last three there. Elimination of gun-free zones. What I would tell you, for those of us that have had students, my daughter graduated from Warren Central High School in 2020, and I was at the high school during that time, and part of my charge and my mission was to make sure not only my daughter, but every kid that came to school, they felt safe. When they went to extracurricular activities, they feel safe. And I was privileged to be a part of our cabinet team that went to 3 of our middle schools to have some discussions just around progress and process checks. And one of the questions that was posed was around safety. So you have what the perception is in terms of how people think of what your district is as it relates to safety. And then you have what I call the actual feeling. And what I was really excited about was at all 3 middle schools we went to, we talked to each student group, and they said that they felt safe at school. They feel safe. And that's important, and that's really it's attributed to the investments that we've made, the adults that we have in place, our awesome principals, our teachers, our staff, our custodians, everyone that's part of that culture, their commitment each and every day to school safety, and they want our kids to feel safe. 2 non-school safety related things I want to touch on just from my past as a high school athletic director. House Bill 1185, athletic trainers. That bill proposes try to expand opportunities for rural communities to have access to athletic trainers. I just want to let you know that that same need exists in urban areas as well. We have a high school, as you know, we have 3 middle schools through the leadership and quite honestly, just the vision of Mr. Parkinson, as well as our superintendent, when I came to them and say, hey, we need to make sure that we have that same level of support for our middle school athletes as well. They approved those positions. We have yet to fill those positions because of the shortage of athletic trainers. Now, I will tell you this, that part of that shortage is due to now athletic trainers are required to have a master's degree. That wasn't the case 5, 6, 7 years ago. That's contributed to the shortage. But what I can tell you is that all of us are dealing with that shortage. So I would encourage, if this is something that comes your way, that you would ask them to expand that, because that affects all of us. And then as well, the last one, school events. I know this came up last year in terms of a cash requirement around entry to athletic events. As you know, due to COVID, many of us went away from cash, and we look for cashless ways for patrons to come to our events. What I would tell you is that here in Warren Township, we're going to do what's in the best interest of our community. And I would argue that for most communities. My point is, we don't necessarily need a law in place to require us to do what's best for the people in Warren Township. We will always do that. We're doing it currently, and it's something we will continue to do. If you have any questions for me.
Great presentation, thank you. And I just want to say on Senate Bill 67 for the secure school safety that I drafted, it gives a lot more flexibility to, it allows just other than just like a school safety officer, it allows, like you said, the programming. And one example that we don't think, it can address bullying. So if you have a private partner or community partner this is one I talked to, that say for instance, they do work around, I was told like kids get bullied for their medical conditions. So say like they have diabetes or lupus and they have to actually be off for school or take medication while they're in school. They actually get bullied for that. And so they can partner with the school to do a program and help bring around education awareness around that medical condition that their peers are experiencing to reduce the bullying that they receive from the disability or the illness that they have. That's just an example that this would allow with that as well for Senate Bill 67. I just want to give you an additional example. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to chime in and say this. I said this as superintendent this morning. And hopefully this is helpful to the crowd. So when I hear you say you're going to do what's best for your district, I get it, and God bless you, and I think that's good. As a state legislator, my ability to pick up the phone and call a local mayor and affect change is sometimes non-existent. My ability to pick up the phone and call a sheriff or a superintendent or somebody else is not existent. The only tool in the tool bag of a legislator is to draft a bill. Sometimes that bill is trying to affect policy. Sometimes the bill's trying to get the attention of somebody and trying to affect change in a different way, or bring people to the table to have a discussion that are otherwise unwilling to have the conversation. So I would just ask all of you to consider that sometimes bills, and I appreciate Senator Hunley's position of, it seems like the problem bills are in the House at the moment, but don't worry, we'll find a way to make that our problem soon, I'm sure. I mean, we're not incapable of that. So I hope it's helpful to understand that sometimes a legislator's trying to get the attention of somebody or trying to do something that matters. And I would also say this, there's 1,000 bills that are filed. At the end of the day, about 150 of them or so are going to pass. So we are in the first quarter of the football game at the moment. So what you see today and what may be problematic right now, these things are very helpful in having the dialogue and the conversation to get to what is a good public policy for everybody, urban, rural, wherever that is. And I will just say to end, God bless you for what you're doing. I mean, there's no higher order here than to protect kids in schools, and thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Coming to the stage. No. Ms. Laura Buckwright.
Good morning. My name is Laura Buckwright. I am the Director of College and Career Readiness for our district, which means I oversee our school counselors, our college and career readiness initiatives, as well as our family engagement liaison programs. I am here today to advocate for your support of Senate Bill 36. This critical legislation prioritizes mental, emotional, and academic success of students and reinforces the role of the school counselor through the model of a comprehensive school counseling program. This bill sets a clear, actionable standard for school counselors to dedicate their time where it matters most, directly engaging with students and the supports that they need to be successful. By the 27-28 school year, this bill would ensure that 80% of the counselor's time will be spent providing direct and indirect services for students, aligning with the American School Counseling Association's national model. The bill uses the term direct services, and I believe a more accurate and intended wording would be both direct and indirect counseling services, and I'll explain that a little bit here in another slide. School counselors are master's level licensed professionals with the unique training in education, supporting academic achievement, mental health, academics, as well as college and career readiness. It's a pretty big hat to wear. This bill would mean more face-to-face counseling, intervention, and support with less time spent on administrative tasks. It's a shift that ensures that counselors are accessible as well as proactive and focused on student needs. When you look at a comprehensive school counseling program, the national model, as well as Indiana's Gold Star model, which is supported by the Department of Ed and the Indiana School Counseling Association, is based upon an 80-20 division of duties. So 80% of a counselor's duties should be dedicated to direct and indirect services. So that includes instruction, which are classroom lessons, small groups, large group, providing knowledge and skill development, individual and small group counseling, appraisal and assessment, which is using data at the school level, at the district level, at the individual level to identify student needs and measure impact. We utilize referrals to outside agencies when students need more support than can be provided by the school counselor or within the school. So we collaborate with the agencies to refer out. We also are fortunate to have licensed school-based mental therapists in all of our buildings as well. So when students have a more intensive need for mental health services, they can access that directly in our buildings. And then we do an incredible amount of collaboration and consultation with families, with parents, with caregivers, teachers, administrators, special education teachers, ML educators, to create a network of support for our students. The other 20% is spent on defining our program, managing our program, building our annual calendar, aligning our program K-12 so that the services and the initiatives that we're doing are reinforced and consistent throughout their K-12 experience in Warren. And then also assessing what we're doing, measuring our interventions. Are they having an impact? How do we need to change that? So spending that time working on our program, and then acknowledging that all counselors participate as well in fair share duties, which are those duties that we need to maintain that safe school environment that every individual in the building takes part in, the supervision, getting kids in, out of the building, all of those things. I have to take a minute to say I'm really excited to brag about Warren Township a little bit. To be recognized as a comprehensive school counseling program in Indiana, that's called Gold Star. It's a 2 to 3 year process, and through that 2 to 3 years, all 14 of our schools in the last 2 years underwent this process. What that involves is we did extensive data analysis of our district, our students, our schools, identifying needs as well as achievement and opportunity gaps. Based upon that, every school counselor in every building identified specific goals and outcomes with a plan, an action plan, interventions, and that, as well as creating and maintaining an advisory council made up of student, staff, parents, administrators, and community members. An annual administrative conference where counselors sit down with their building leader every year and share their goals, share the data that they're looking at, what they've done, what they're improving, how they're going to continue to build their program. As I mentioned, alignment, all the goals, themes throughout, and then ongoing analysis of how our counselors are using that time. During that process, our counselors had to provide all of this evidence, submit it, have it evaluated, receive feedback, and be approved. There are only 2 school districts in the state of Indiana that have all of their schools Gold Star. We are one of them. The other school district only has 3 schools, so that's a pretty big accomplishment for Warren, and our counselors worked very hard in the past 2 years. So we received that in November. This coming July, we will receive the recognized American School of Counseling Model Program at the ASCA conference this summer. So programs that are grounded in the American School Counseling Conference like Gold Star have demonstrated significant benefits. In our own township over the past years, we've identified our specific goals and interventions, and that we saw clear impact of academic achievement improved, We had an impact on our attendance, which you heard is a huge focus, and we know we need students here to support them, and decrease discipline referrals. We have 39 school counselors in our district in every building. The average caseload for students to counselor ratio for Warren Township is 325. Indiana actually ranks one of the worst states as a state average in terms of counselor-student ratio. So in the state of Indiana, it's in the area of about 600 to 1. And we are very grateful for our school board and our superintendent and cabinet investment in our school counseling program. The success that we've experienced here is supported by truly data-driven decisions and directly tied to focused and intentional counseling efforts, because when counselors have the tools and the time to address academic, behavioral, and attendance challenges, our students thrive. Comprehensive school counseling, there is an extensive amount of research behind them, and we know that schools that have a comprehensive school counseling model show enhanced academic and career readiness. They see higher college enrollment rates, which we know in Marion County is another need that we're seeing, and we've got several initiatives in our district working to improve that college enrollment rate, as well as better preparedness for the workforce. We mentioned the improved attendance and engagement. As has been mentioned several times this morning, when students feel connected and safe in school, they show up and they participate and are engaged. They also provide preventative and proactive mental health support. Counselors are able to identify early challenges through, as Ms. Gogol mentioned, we rely on our teachers and our administrators to help us identify students so that we can intervene early and hopefully prevent future crises or more intentional mental health needs. We know specifically at the elementary level where early intervention helps students to develop those problem-solving, learning, and emotional regulation skills that helps them and supports them throughout their academic career. Sorry. This is not just about the numbers of 80, 20% school counselors ratios. It really is about equity and opportunity. This bill gives every student access to tools that they need to succeed, and that's every student. It empowers our counselors to close achievement and opportunity gaps, foster belonging and build relationships, and prepare all of our students to be as successful as possible upon leaving Warren Township. This is an opportunity for you to support a lasting investment in our children and our schools and community. With your support, we can make sure our counselors are positioned to make the greatest possible impact, and we can support a better, more equitable, and brighter future for all of our students. So I appreciate your support in helping us prioritize our students' success. I'm happy to answer questions. Yes?
Thank you for the information. So I just have a quick question. So as I'm talking to students and we're talking about their school counselors, one of their concerns is that the counselors are older and they would like to see younger counselors, and they would like to see more peer-to-peer counseling. So 2 questions. Do you guys incorporate peer-to-peer counseling? And then also, out of your 39 counselors, how many are in that kind of millennial age group?
So in terms of peer counseling, yes, we have done, at one of our middle schools, they, a couple years ago, went through a training for that, like peer mentoring, and that we have programs where our older students then mentor the younger students in the middle school. Similar to that, we have an ML, our multilingual ambassador program at the high school. So we have opportunities for newcomers that come into the high school to be partnered with another high school student with similar language background that was also a relatively newcomer that can bridge that language gap, and they are paired with them as they transition in high school. That's been incredibly successful, and we are hoping to take that model and adapt that at the middle school level as well. In terms of the age range of our school counselors. I probably am one of those counselors they might have considered old, although I don't feel that way. But yeah, I have 30 years experience as a school counselor, so I guess that does qualify me as being one of the older ones. We're very fortunate. We actually have, off the top of my head, out of 39, I would say a good half of them would be, the kids would see as young. I don't know where you want to put the age range in there. We've also had, when we talk about teacher recruitment and that, we've had great success with bringing counselors in their last semester or last year of their master's program. The counseling license requires 600 hours of direct in-school experience. And so we've worked with IU, now IU Indy, Ball State, Marion, as well as Butler, that we reach out to their last year's graduate students, and we've had great success in bringing them in, getting them an emergency permit so they can be fully salaried and paid for that internship time. And then all of the people that we've done that with have become full-time employees and licensed counselors with us. So that's been a great advantage. Don't tell the other school districts about that. I want to keep them to ourselves.
That's great, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. All right, I think Mr. Parkinson.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to spend a few slides talking about ideas in the property tax space, the state funding space that are concerns for our school district. But I do want to take 2 slides just to highlight some wins and offer some thank you and praise for the General Assembly. The raises for teachers that Brian covered earlier, $2,000 4 years in a row, those are made possible because the state tuition support funding increased in those 4 years. Almost 4% a year for us, plus SPED, plus multilingual learners. So members of the General Assembly, we thank you sincerely for that. Senator Hunley, to the question you asked earlier about paid parental leave, back in Napkin, just sitting over here, we pay substitute teachers $150 a day. So 20 days, if we say we had 33 births in a year, that comes to about $100,000 a year. I think that's probably a fair place to start the conversation for a school district like ours, if we want to cover that cost. That's, again, just kind of back in Napkin. We support and thank the General Assembly for funding curricular materials, removing that burden from our families. We're going to get about $1.8 million per year. I'll tell you, it's not enough to cover our actual cost of materials. This year, we're going to adopt English language arts, and we're going to be probably 1.5 times that number, maybe even a little bit above that. So we would advocate for increased funding in that space. And I want to highlight 3 grants: the Teacher Appreciation Grant, which we've covered, and then 2 that we haven't, at least not in much depth. The Early Literacy Achievement Grant was new in the state budget last year. It was a $10 million line item. It's really geared towards school districts that are showing growth in literacy, like what Mr. Russell covered earlier. Here in MSD Warren, 2 years in a row, second highest dollar amount in the state as a reflection of that growth in our literacy performance. We've been able to offer meaningful stipends to our elementary school teachers as a result, and so we thank you and appreciate that. I believe that number is in the governor's budget proposal that's currently House Bill 1001, so we'd advocate for continued funding there. And then Secured School Safety Grant. As Mr. Clayton mentioned, we use it. It's critical to us in terms of school safety. This was our first year that we went below that maximum $100,000 amount. So to me, this is a prime candidate for increased funding. We'd also welcome your support. You know, the funding level by school districts is capped at $100,000 for school districts that are substantially smaller than we are and for fairly large ones like we are. So our advocacy would be twofold: increased funding to that grant, and we would welcome some sort of conversation around funding to reflect the scale of operating a police department here at MSD Warren Township. So I want to just offer a broad picture of who we are as a school district. We're a large enterprise here on the east side of Indianapolis. From our primary funds, we're going to spend about $160 million this year. Our property tax levy is about $59 million. After you take out tax cap credits, we'll collect in the low 50s. So property tax funding is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/3 of our overall funding as a school district. And we're going to just cover each of these funds briefly. The education fund, the way that we think about this one is this is what happens in the classroom. It's instructional. And I'll tell you too, it's almost entirely people. We have a $90 million education fund budget this year, and we're going to spend pretty close to every dollar of that. 83.4 million of that is wages and benefits for teachers, instructional assistants, building secretaries, building principals, folks that are hands-on with our kids. And the next $2 million even after that is substitute teachers, which we happen to work with an outside agency on. But the point that I'm looking to make on the education fund is, as we advocate for increased funding and state tuition support, increased funding for the state for K through 12 out of state funding, ultimately that's going to impact teachers and instructional assistants who are in front of our kids. We can tell you that the marketplace for teachers, it's not an easy time to hire right now. There aren't enough people going into the profession to fill the positions that we have. And the trajectory has not looked better. And so this is an area just from a priority standpoint we have to continue pouring into if we want to be able to put qualified folks in front of our kids. The next fund, and I'm going to spend 2 slides talking about the operations fund. I would say this is probably the fund that's most vulnerable to a lot of the conversations that we're having around property taxes at the moment. Our operations fund budget's about $38 million. We're going to spend this year probably $36 million. We've been really prudent and cautious to increase our fund balance in the operations fund over the last few years, recognizing that there could be changes coming in the way that property taxes work in Indiana. But I can tell you too, there's a lot in this fund that's really difficult to control. So I've got up here transportation, utilities, and then the dollar amount that we're going to pay for property and casualty insurance, plus we're self-insured for workers' compensation. These 3 costs are either fixed or relatively close to fixed. We're going to drive kids to and from school. We're going to pay the light bill, and we're going to insure our buildings. So regardless of what happens with the operations fund, we have to pay for these pieces. The operations fund otherwise is very broad. It covers our custodians, our grounds crew, our mechanics. It covers a lot of technology in the school district, things that happen here central office-wise, capital projects in our building. It's diverse in its usage. And then I want to speak about the property tax side of the operations fund. So we have seen growth in the operations fund in the last couple of years. There's a statutory formula on how much your levy can go up. What I'll tell you is, even without the General Assembly making any changes at all here in 2025, we expect to have flat revenue in the operations fund this year. And that's with no changes at all to the property tax system. The biggest piece that's driving this is increase in circuit breaker. And so there's a nuanced conversation here that maybe is even past the scope of what we can cover just in a forum like this. But counterintuitively, perhaps, a piece of that large increase in circuit breaker reduction is a reduction in the amount of the supplemental homestead standard deduction. So 2 years ago, the General Assembly passed homeowner relief on property tax bills. And one of the things that did was increase supplemental standard deduction. Well, as that piece goes back down this year, what that's resulting in is a shift in the property tax burden from 2% and 3% to property taxpayers back to homeowners. But most of those homeowners are already at their 1% property tax cap. So we can modify their deductions. It doesn't ultimately impact, in this particular case, for many of those folks, the dollar amount they're paying, at least into funds like the operations fund. Instead, it functionally serves as a revenue reduction for school districts. And so I offer that to say, we're going to talk about a couple of bills that deal with property taxes. And look, I wasn't born yesterday. We recognize that property tax relief in some form is coming this year, and that's okay. We welcome the chance to be part of that conversation. My encouragement to the General Assembly is to consider the impact of individual property tax deductions and exemptions on the overall property tax picture, and recognize that there can be cases where property tax relief, especially on the homeowner side, can have less of a burden on school districts compared to property tax relief in the 2% and 3% classes. So again, there's a lot of nuance to that conversation, and I'd welcome a chance to talk with any of you on your legislative assistants, fiscal analysts, about those impacts. One other piece that I do think is critical to call out, and I mentioned this last year too, is sharing property tax revenue with charter schools is no longer an idea. This is where we are. We're sharing in 4 counties, including Marion County this year, property tax dollars with charter schools. And for us, the impact of that in year 1 is $143,000. and that impact will grow every year, even without any changes at the General Assembly level. I mentioned this last year. There's a difference in governance between public school districts and charter schools. We have an elected school board that's responsive to the voters, responsive to local taxpayers. That reality isn't the case with charter schools. So I recognize the difficulty of that conversation, but of all the pieces we mentioned on the operations fund that we know that we're going to have to pay for this year, that $143,000 reduction to us is meaningful. Our last major fund is our operating referendum fund. So as Mr. Clayton mentioned, we passed with community support a renewed referendum in 2023, and we're paying for the things we told the community that we would pay for. So this is our MSD Warren Township Police Department. That $4.4 million is a piece of every support staff member's pay here in Warren Township. $2.8 million is transportation. So I should mention, combined with the operations fund, we're about $10 million transporting kids to and from school every year. We'll pay for our Chromebooks and iPads for students, and then all of our 5th through 12th grade counselors are paid for out of the operating referendum fund. So just to honor everybody's time, I'm not going to go through this entire formula in terms of property taxes, but the piece that I'm hoping to lay out for the community's consideration, for legislative consideration, is the property tax revenue that a school district collects ultimately begins at the individual parcel level, which is the top line here. And so as we consider modifications to deductions or exempting certain types of property from the property tax picture, that ultimately is going to filter its way down and impact school district revenue. The most direct way that it does it is as portions of the property tax base are reduced, that reduces the overall net assessed value for school districts and other local governments, which increases property tax rates, shifting property tax burden from one type of property taxpayer to another, but also in cases where taxpayers are at their caps, as again, most of our homeowners here on the east side are, it ultimately results in a revenue reduction to school districts. So conversations around modifications to deductions and exemptions are difficult, and there's a lot of detail to them, but we would ask you to consider the impact on revenue for school districts. Let's spend 2 slides just briefly covering a few bills. There are dozens of bills that have been filed, Senator Freeman, to your point, impacting school district finance. And we recognize that many of them or most of them won't make it to the finish line. So I'm attempting to call out those that either have a hearing scheduled or that it would seem have some level of momentum. State budget is critical, of course. This one's going to pass in some form. It's going to set our funding for the 2 years starting on July 1st. The governor's budget proposal started it at 2% funding increases for K-12 per year. That doesn't necessarily mean a 2% increase for us, but I think that's a fair place to start the conversation, recognizing that the budget picture is tighter this year. But we're going to advocate, and we'd ask for your support for increased funding for K-12. Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1402 have a lot of similar language in them. These are the main property tax relief bills, or it appears at least that's going to be the case. A lot of changes to deductions, a lot of changes to exemptions impacting homestead properties, properties capped at 2%, so that's farmland and rental properties, 3% properties, which are typically commercial. There's impacts on the way the tax bills work, impacts on referenda. I agree, we're early in the conversation to recognize what's actually going to make it. I will call out that the fiscal note that the Legislative Services Agency prepares for both of these paints a pretty dire picture in terms of revenue lost to school districts here in Indiana. So again, we'd appreciate consideration around the impact from those. Senate Bill 8, school levy referenda. So again, we went to the community with a referendum conversation 2 years ago. This one brings forward some important conversations. There's a piece of it that school districts are not going to support, I don't think, which is creating one single maximum levy amount. And the key piece is it's not indexed over the years as it's written right now. And so what that means is we would go to the community and say, we need to raise $13 million or whatever it is. Well, the way that it's written right now, that would be $13 million flat over the 8 years, which just isn't realistic in terms of our ability to provide compensation for people out of the referendum fund. I do think, however, that this bill is a vehicle for an important conversation about wording in the referendum fund, or excuse me, in the referendum ballot language. As we've discussed over both of the last 2 years, it's confusing for voters that go to the polls to understand what the ballot question means. And to the credit of the authors, this language is clearer. And so I think it's progress on that front. So there's challenges with the way that it's worded, but we do appreciate the conversation. Senate Bill 9 deals with the max levy growth quotient, impacting the amount that the operations fund can go up every year. There's another bill that's going to look at continuing the 4% cap that we've had. We understand that conversation is important. It just, again, would advocate that our operations fund is hurting, and we need the General Assembly's support. And finally, Senate Bill 518. I don't know what the actual odds are of this one moving forward, but this bill fundamentally rewrites the way that tax sharing with charter schools works. So right now, we're sharing a piece of our operations fund. This would really eliminate that piece component, and it says all of your operations fund revenue, but also on top of that, all of your debt service fund revenue is shared with charter schools. This would, in a fundamental way, shift the way that school districts are funded. So if this bill gains momentum, we have concern, and we'd appreciate conversation around that. And then finally, it was 1501, I believe. This one I didn't put up here, but the one that Ms. Gogol mentioned earlier, that would establish a process where we have a centralized board to manage facilities and transportations. That's getting into dangerous territory in terms of local control and the ability for our school board to manage what our local citizens need. That bill also creates processes where students at charter schools and private schools receive transportation services. And to be clear, we want great things for all students. I will share that those things don't come free. And so the notion of losing local control over those pieces with expanded services is certainly a concern. It's just my last piece. In terms of advocacy, again, we would ask the General Assembly, please exercise caution with deductions and exemptions. We recognize that property tax relief in some form is coming. Consider the impact on school districts. I would encourage you to focus, especially if you're going to, on property tax relief geared toward 1%, which is homesteads. I think that's an area where mutual wins can be found with relief for those taxpayers without the biggest type of impact to school districts. And again, a big piece of any of these exemptions is when we reduce the property tax base for one class of property, it shifts the tax burden to other taxpayers. We'd advocate for replacing revenue wherever possible through the state funding formula, through local income tax, through whatever other pieces. And then, of course, we're going to advocate for continued state tuition support increases. This is the year to closely monitor Legislative Services Agency's school runs. Be happy to answer any questions.
I'm going to 6th grade basketball, so don't.
And I have a funeral. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm sorry, and I also have a 12 o'clock appointment, but I just wanted to let you all know, I have texted and sent a lot of your bills, the pros and cons, to other caucus members, including the Democrat caucus and the Black caucus. So not only are you speaking to us, but now they have your information, whether if it's a pro or you're opposing certain bills. But thank you for giving us this information. As I always say, I'm not on education committee, but when I come here, I learn so much. So I appreciate all the time that you spend with us and how you detail out everything that we need to know. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. French to close this out.
Turn it over to Brian.
Okay, turn it over to Brian.
For members of the community who attended today, thank you very much for your attendance. I want to encourage everyone who has any other further questions or concerns regarding the material that was covered today to contact our legislature's representatives. Their contact information is on the program, and they have always demonstrated responsiveness, so do not hesitate to contact them. They are responsive to constituent concerns. So I just want to encourage members of the community who have been in attendance today to do so if you have any questions or concerns. And with that, again, on behalf of the members of the Board of Education and everyone involved in Warren Township Schools, thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over for just some final comments from our legislators. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, as always. This would be my 5th or 6th time joining, and it's always a privilege to do so. Even though, I'm not in the State House, we're here locally. I mean, we're a lot closer to you. I mean, we're we're in session all year long. But any rate, my name is, it's Michael Paul Hart. You know, my district makes up a jigsaw piece in Warren Township, goes as north as 21st Street, as south as Troy, east as Carroll, and as west as Emerson, right? So I see, you know, a lot of the district, a lot of the township. You know, my vision for the city of Indianapolis as a counselor, and I say it all the time, is to be the smartest city in America. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? Education is a piece, technology is a piece, you know, the partnership with all of our school districts make up a piece of that. And I think Warren is a phenomenal partner in helping us achieve that vision and goal. And it takes opportunity and conversations like this for that to be a reality. A couple things that, you know, as I sit back, listen, reflect on, you know, what can we do and where can we be effective locally. I think one of the most things that we've seen recently is it's making sure kids can get to school safely, right? You know, I think everybody here put a lot of pressure on the city recently with a lot of these snowstorms, and it's things that you know, we're trying to make sure. I mean, we're doing our part. We funded it completely. The money's there. Now it's an administrative need to make sure that those roads are clean, so the kids are out there. They've got sidewalks to stand on. They're safe. They're not, you know, their buses that they're in are safe. You know, we are constantly thinking about those things and those prudent activities to make sure that, you know, all kids are safe to come to school. You know, recently this week I had the opportunity to sit through a Circle City Readers program here in Warren Township. There's only 2 school districts that I'm aware of that are partnering with the City of Indianapolis's Department of Education and Innovation, and that's Warren Township and IPS. So I'm grateful that Warren has taken that opportunity and allowed Circle City Readers to come into the school and help students achieve a higher level of literacy, and it's showing, right? It's not the only reason that you guys are achieving a high rate, but I'd like to think that it's you know, helpful in achieving those higher level of literacy rates. I do see some opportunity though, right? I was, you know, thumbing through some of the accountability grades as I was sitting up here, and it looks like, you know, 6th grade math is a real opportunity, and I'm going to take that back to our city administration and see if, you know, what options do we have? You know, how can we continue to have these conversations at the council level to make sure there's funding for programs like Circle City Readers, but also, you know, what is there, you know, in the conversations we can have as it pertains to math, because that's equally important. And then finally, you know, things I'm curious about, and we don't have to answer them now, and I know a lot of you, but after seeing the presentation, one thing that didn't touch, I have a lot more that we can learn about, I think, is technology. You know, my background is in technology. That's where I spend my days, my life as my professional. And I have school kids too, by the way. I've got a freshman in high school, and I've got a 5th grader. And the thing that concerns me the most is, you know, preparing them for life after school and the technology we're choosing to use to get them there. I think some of that does come back to our state officials and making sure that the funding is there so you guys can afford the proper technology. But when I see iPads and Chromebooks, that's not what we use in the professional world, right? It's Microsoft and it's Apple on Mac, right? And there's a gap. I see it for my kids, and if I can see it at my home, I'm sure that gap is going to persist as it goes. But the other one that I want to leave you with in a thought, and it's something that I want to challenge the counselors to think with me on, is internet access. And how does that impact the students here? You know, I'd be curious to know how many students at Warren Central, at any school in Warren, have access to internet at home. You know, technology is ever expanding. There's a lot of opportunities that we could potentially do at the city level. And again, in that vision for the smartest city of America, I think there should be the ability for every student to have the ability to connect to internet at home, and I think the city of Indianapolis can make that happen. But we've got to get some data points from you guys to know, you know, what does that gap look like and how do we get there? So that's me, that's the vision, and I'm grateful to learn from everybody here and see the faces in the crowd and know that this is equally important to you. So thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is Renee Allen. I know looks like it's Rena, but it's actually Renee. I've been called Rena, so just Renee, just FYI. I represent District 15. I was just appointed, I haven't done a full year yet. I was just appointed as of May 18th of 2024. My kids actually grew up in Lawrence, and so, but I represent a little bit of Lawrence, and I represent the parents of Warren Township. I do thank you all for the great presentation that you put in, that you all put on today. I've taken the time out over the last few months trying to get to know different teachers, especially over at Brookview Elementary. And sorry I could not make the Circle City program on the other day. The time got changed and I had a work meeting thereafter, so I do apologize for that. I appreciate all the work that you all doing from safety. I do come to the football games, especially when you're playing Lawrence North, so I do come to the football games, but I have seen the presence. I do go to church with a lot of Warren parents and students. Two things that you brought up. One thing you brought up, the very first thing I want to say, what's important to me for education is the reading program. I would like to see, and I've been in a few conversations where I want to see our young kids begin to read. I want to be able to try to create some type of incentive because we don't do a lot of reading, especially with our males. That's what I want to specifically concentrate on. The second thing, which you just brought up, internet access. So if you can please give me that data, I would greatly appreciate it because I have been in conversation. There is the funding for that. It's just we got to have the data, like my colleague just said, for us to be able to take that to push it through. And as you just said, it's the apple that we're looking at. Right. We have to be able to look at that and bring in more technology. We can do it all, but technology is the way that we have to go nowadays. That's what the kids is learning, and we have to stay on top of that. But that's all I have for right now, because education, as we were just sitting up here saying, this is very important to us. I don't sit on that particular committee, but education does matter to me, and I want to see all of us thrive and all of our children thrive.
Thank you, Councilor Allen. Leader Hart, I appreciate the conversation on internet access, and I think that's a really important role we could play on the council and the city level. So my name is Andy Nielsen. I serve as City Councilor for District 14. So my district goes all the way from Emerson to Mithofer, 21st to Washington, but if you're familiar with Irvington, it goes all down to Irvington, so kind of a hammerhead. So I have the privilege of representing a lot of Warren Township. For those who were here last year, you're going to hear me say it every year. I'm also married to a warrior and someone who grew up in Warren Township schools. So this community is very important to our family and why we choose to live on the east side. I'll be short because I kind of got into it before, but I think for local government, especially in our city, as we look at a hierarchy of needs, I also think about the hierarchy of responsibility of local government. And first and foremost, that starts with basic services. So as Leader Hart was saying, making sure our streets are safe for students, parents, professionals to get to school, to get to work, doctor's appointments, et cetera. Making sure our roads are in a state where you can also safely travel through them. But then as we kind of knock those issues out of the park, I think it's our responsibility to take on basic needs. A big priority of mine, and I think probably everyone who sits up here is addressing housing instability or creating housing stability in our county. And I think that's exactly how we can help continue to support you. You all are doing amazing work. That's very clear by today's presentation. And I always want us to make sure that we are supporting you in the best way that we can, and that comes by listening to what you're doing, not trying to replace the good work you are doing. So that's just a final commitment that I'm here to make, and appreciate the opportunity this morning, so thank you.
Good morning, State Senator Mike Kreider. I represent District 28, which is all of Hancock County, the city of Shelbyville North and Shelby County, and you're sitting in my district. I have the portion of Warren Township, and one of the things that I wanted to do is, I didn't hear it come up this morning, was again congratulate Warren for receiving the Indiana Youth Services Association Community Education Award. I was glad to join Dr. Hanson and James at the State House recently, and it's just a reflection of the work that's happening in the community. My district is really pretty fascinating for me from the education aspect because I've got Shelby Central School and Warren Central, where the idea of the complexity of students is really pretty graphic to me because many of the other schools I represent in Hancock County and even northern Shelby County don't have those same, or at least not the intensity of that challenge. And so that's been a valuable thing for me. I have a monthly breakfast over at Ciro's here in Cumberland with all of the school superintendents. Dr. Hanson attends when he can, and we have a really good conversation around the challenges and the concerns that you've expressed this morning. I hear those on a monthly basis, I can assure you. And so I, in the Senate, am a member of the Appropriations Committee, and so I'm going to be one of the guys that's stuck in the room and trying to make some of the final decisions. And I can assure you that the importance of education, for all the reasons that have already been articulated, is critical to us. In my legislative priority personally, most of the legislation I file and advocate for are around those difficulties of mental health and addiction and domestic violence and all those trauma-inducing type situations that cause our young folks to need intervention. So I'm really grateful to hear that you have a robust counseling program and that you're working well, because I believe that the earliest intervention in that space really yields the best results for our young people. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to listen to your input, and just know that through Dr. Hanson and other members of your school, I'm available for a conversation as these things move forward. Thank you.
And good morning, everyone. I am Andrea Hunley. I'm one of your other state senators. I represent the west portion of Warren Township, and I also have parts of Perry Township schools, Wayne Township, and then Indianapolis Public Schools as well. So I get to get a nice landscape of schools that are around Marion County. I serve on our education committee in the Senate, and I started out my career as a teacher and then as a school principal. And after 2 decades in the public education space, I know enough to know that I am not an expert. When I'm on that education committee, I appreciate, there are several folks in this room who've come in to testify before. I know that the experts in the space are those of you who are currently parents, who are currently on the school board, who are currently in our classrooms, who are currently working in the central office, because the landscape in education is constantly changing. And so thank you so much for all of the information that you shared with us today to help us better understand the current landscape. I also serve on our Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee as well. And so I was feverishly taking some notes as Matt was talking. And I know that as the CFO, you provide us with a lot of information. And so I appreciate your work on that as well. And just again, thank you so much for being here. Know that we are working hard to fight for you. And I will say, Counselor, that you all are lucky that we're not in session all year. You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want to feel this level of stress all of the time. So thank you all, and I look forward to getting to know you as we walk around the room. I am going to ask a favor of our board. Board members, if we could come up and let's snap a quick picture. We want to celebrate all the work that you're doing on our social channels, and if we don't get pics, it didn't happen, right? So thank you all again. Great to be with you. And Dr. Hanson, of course.
All right.